during my decades of trying to overcome social anxiety, I really struggled to find good information about it. So that's why I wanted to film this video for you, which condenses a lot of what I learned, which is what is social anxiety? And I mean, what is it really? Because I did not like a lot of the information that I found out there. So let's dive into this. There's going to be lots of information in this. It's more of a lecture type video. So if you watch through to the end, I hope that you're going to take away some valuable nuggets of information. So as I said, what is social anxiety really? Because when I was delving into this, first of all, I found myself getting very tired of the kind of mainstream, what I say is BS. I mean, it's obviously factual, but it never really covered what I was feeling. I kept coming across things like definitions that would say a marked and persistent fear of one or more social or performance situations in which the person is exposed to unfamiliar people or to possible scrutiny. Now that's great, that's probably factually accurate to some extent, but I did not feel it encapsulated the experience of what I was going through at all. What I was experiencing felt way more important and way more difficult. You will come across lots of statistics like this, which are actually becoming outdated because the statistics are rising significantly since COVID and with Gen Z. But these kind of statistics, I'm not saying they're not helpful. Actually, for me, you know, that whole first part of this journey where you discover that this is a real thing and that there are numbers to it and that tens of millions of other people have it, this was very helpful. I'm not discounting this at all. I'm just saying that when you first start delving into this stuff, you're going to come across the same kind of medical definitions from the DSM, which is the medical handbook on mental health disorders. You're going to come across the same kind of statistics. And if you're anything like me, you're going to keep going through like these main websites like Very Well Mind, Mayo Clinic, all the main websites that come up on Google search, and you're going to start hitting your head against a wall, which is like, right, now I understand what it is, but none of this seems to be getting to the heart of the problem. It doesn't seem to be identifying really what's going on with me. So this is what we say in England as this does not really cut the mustard. Yeah, that's what I felt. I was like, okay, that's great to an extent, but it does not get into what I'm really feeling at all. This is not going far enough. So what I felt with this stuff that I was coming across is it didn't discuss, talk about, or cover any of what was going on in my life, which was these very loud racing thoughts, which actually made me feel like maybe I'm insane. And I've had many discussions with clients who have admitted a bit, you know, sort of shamefully sometimes, they're like, I actually thought I was going crazy. It can get so bad that you do contemplate suicide over this. I'm not doing that to fearmonger, scaremonger, or exaggerate, but that's really what made me feel suicidal at times. I was like, if I can't control all these really loud racing thoughts about how useless I am and how creepy and pathetic I am, you know, this is just like grinding me down internally, daily. And that was causing me a lot of depression and making me question how long could I possibly continue living in this way, in this kind of cycle. So none of the literature that I came across really talked about, yeah, you may feel insane at times and it may push you to feel suicidal. It didn't ever talk about, I didn't see stuff talking about you feel like you're creeping people out. There's some sort of aura around you perhaps, which makes people move away from you, or you're just repellent to people. Like you'll look at someone and then they'll look away and cross the road. You start having these feelings. This is like often accompanied by lots of magical thinking. You feel like if you do something, it's going to make someone else do something, or there's this person you really don't want to bump into and then you'll bump into them and you're like, I knew it, like I'm making stuff happen. This is not rational. This is not factual. This is magical thinking. There's lots of stuff around mind reading, which I feel isn't discussed. You feel that you can really read what other people are thinking and they can really read what you're thinking. And this is linked into the eye contact problem where you're like, oh, this is so creepy. They can understand everything. Like they can see all my problems, my faults and insecurities right through my eyes. And, you know, there's this very clear communication through the eyes of just how lacking I am. And although they're speaking away saying, yeah, this is fine, blah, 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 the eyes are telling a totally different story. So it all just starts to get really out of control, totally irrational, unfactual, unscientific. And none of this is really talked about in the literature, I don't think. There can be lots of paranoia. You can hear people laughing and think they're laughing about you. You'll go into a coffee shop, you know, someone gets up and leaves and you think, oh, they've left because of me. Or you sit down in a meeting and someone moves places and you're like, that's because of me. You get very, very paranoid. You can even hear like people laughing far away from you, or birds making noise and thinking, is that someone laughing at me? Like for me and, you know, people that I've shared with, this is real stuff. These are actual situations. Another thing that I didn't see touched upon is just the extent to how bad the symptoms can be. Like if you're put in a public speaking situation, the physical symptoms can be so intense. Like you might have total blank and not even be able to muster up any words to, you know, summon any of your vocabulary. You might also find your hand doing stuff that you don't want it to do, like coming up to your face and touching you almost like involuntarily, which is also very uncomfortable. So there's this feeling of like almost losing control of your motor functions because your tension and anxiety is so high. Like you have problems with breathing. You might be holding your breath and almost forget to breathe and stuff, or be unable to breathe. And, you know, the feelings are so much more intense and so much deeper than what I found talked about in the mainstream literature. You know, you feel disgusting. You feel so unworthy. One client told me that someone once took a can of drink from them and just drank from it without wiping it off. And they were just like, their mind was completely blown because they thought they were so disgusting. They couldn't believe that someone would even share a can of drink with them. And as I've said here, as I said, sorry, at the top of this slide, it can potentially be fatal, and I don't think people talk about this. My oldest brother died of a drugs overdose when he was 26, and that was very, very closely linked to his social anxiety. He had crippling social anxiety, and he used opioids and all kinds of drugs to mask that problem, and he died of an overdose when he was 26. And I've heard of other promising young men who have taken their life because of social anxiety. So I know that can be very triggering. I'm not trying to fearmonger, but I just want this problem given the correct amount of recognition. And I don't think it gets that really at the moment. Okay, so moving on. I feel there's a lot of stuff about social anxiety which is misunderstood, right? So what social anxiety is, it is more complex than most people understand. It's often linked in with elements of OCD, obsessive thinking. They call it pure O, when you're not acting on the obsessions, but it's just mental. So you have obsessive thought loops, obsessive rumination. I termed it myself, obsessive mental self-harm. So you would just say these horrible things to yourself again and again, knowing that it's hurting you, but you couldn't almost stop doing it. A bit like when you have a cut on your tongue and you rub it over a tooth and it's painful. You keep doing that to yourself. And it can be linked to other problems like self-sabotage, lots of different stuff going on, complicated issues. Secondly, it's much more serious than people understand. As I said, right? It's not just shyness. That always really upset me and annoyed me when I was told I'm just shy. So it shouldn't be diminished and it shouldn't be minimized, and it kind of angers me and upsets me to see that happening. So it absolutely is not shyness. It's a very serious problem. It's deeper than people understand, right? This is my view on it. Social anxiety is not the problem in itself. I believe it is a symptom of a deeper problem. The deeper problem is usually dysfunctional parenting or some kind of disruption to a healthy psycho-emotional development in a child, which leads to a deep sense of insecurity, a poor self-concept, a lack of self-esteem, a lack of self-love, constantly doubting yourself, very unhealthy mental thought patterns, faulty software, you could call it. This is cognitive distortions. So there is not this deep inner core of self-assurance and self-love. So we're very fragile and we're very moved around by external circumstances and looks people might give us, comments people might give us. We're totally externally orientated because we do not have any of the inner reserves. They were not given to us generally through childhood. And I know there are exceptions, and people watching this might be thinking that this does not apply to me. I had a great childhood. Often, there are exceptions and it happens differently, but generally through the years of coaching people, 7 years I've been doing this on and off, talked with many, many people, and my own experience, it almost always comes down to a lack of self-esteem. There's just not this confidence, not this love in yourself, and no sense of assurance, no sense of safety. There was a deep sense of insecurity somewhere growing up, whether it was financial or due to, very conditional parenting, whatever it was. You just do not feel safe in yourself. So you're very vulnerable, and you are very fragile and very vulnerable to comments and external circumstances. Fourthly, not only is it deeper than people understand, it's broader as well. So it relates to so many other areas of life, and it affects so many other areas of life. So, performance anxiety, giving presentations at work, your sexual performance, your relationships, sexually, platonically, or all areas of life pretty much will be affected by your social anxiety. And also it's very tied into every area of life, like your professional status, like whether you're achieving well academically or professionally, your sleep diets, your exercise habits, all of these things, your nutrition. So it really is a holistic life issue, I believe. That is the way that I approached it, and I approach it with clients, and what generally seems to help people is to see this in a very holistic sense. You need to work on your breathing, your stretching, your posture, the time you go to bed, the time you wake up, all these different things, right? I have never really come across anybody who has all of their life habits dialed in and yet still has social anxiety. It's usually affected by the wider context. It does not exist in a vacuum. Fifth point, this is something I've debated with people over the years. And I personally, this is my viewpoint, right? I don't believe social anxiety is about other people. I believe it's ourselves. It's a problem within ourselves. It's a self-anxiety, a dis-ease with ourselves. We're not comfortable with ourselves. We don't love ourselves. There are parts of ourselves that we don't accept. And then this gets triggered by other people. I see other people as the trigger point for this, and that's why it's social. And I've had conversations with people where they say, but I spend my time in my apartment and I'm completely fine by myself. I never feel anxious. When I go and get around people, then I feel anxious. Therefore, it's social. And to me, that's like saying, oh, when I go out into the field or go down to the beach, I can throw my tennis ball and I throw it so far and it never bounces back. But when I'm in my apartment, I throw my tennis ball and it bounces around all over the place. And I'm like, yeah, because it has something to bounce off. You know what I mean? Like your insecurity with yourself and stuff, you're not sitting there ruminating on it all the time, although I often did. But it's when people are around you, they reflect back to you how you stack up to them, and you feel so inferior, and it triggers these deep-rooted problems that you have in yourself, feeling that you're low status, you're unworthy, you don't have self-esteem, and all of these things. So I very much maintain that the problem is internally. It's not about anything social per se. It's triggered in those situations. It's exacerbated in those social situations because they make you look at yourself. They act as a mirror. You come up against someone who's 6'3", good looking and relaxed and confident, and you think, I'm so wretched by comparison. Whereas when you're comfortable in yourself, you can come up against anybody and you have that self-love and you're like, I'm okay, this guy's okay. Hi, how are you? Oh, nice to meet you. And you're looking for the good in them. You're not just seeing them as a threat and someone that highlights all your own problems. So I very much maintain that it's internal and it's personal. It's not social. And the final point here is that I think all anxiety is not necessarily a negative thing. Anxiety is there as an alarm. It's telling you, right? It's telling you something. It's telling the organism, the psyche, something is not right here. Something is not right. Action needs to happen. So when you're living with social anxiety, I believe the message is that we're not right in ourselves. Like there's issues that need to be addressed. We're not comfortable with ourselves. We haven't reached that point of peace or stability or calm. So instead of just freaking out about that and taking lots of medication and stuff like that, which will ease those symptoms, I believe the work is to delve into the subconscious, which is like going down into the basement and finding the fire. If I just take a bunch of Zoloft and it kills all my emotions and I'm like, oh great, I'm good now, I'm just a Zoloft zombie and I feel nothing. To me, that's like the equivalent of a fire alarm going off, and instead of trying to find out where the fire is, just going and smashing the fire alarm and then going back to bed and going, okay, great, there's no noise, I don't have a problem now. But in the basement of your subconscious, that fire is still burning very strongly. And that fire, I would suggest, is issues with your parents, issues around, all these things of not loving yourself, not liking yourself, probably having body dysmorphia, as I said, these complications, not liking your appearance, loathing your appearance, in my case, when I was younger, all these different things like self-hatred, self-sabotage. These things are going on. These are the real fire that I believe need to be addressed. Okay, so I won't waffle on any longer. Let's move on to the next slide, if it's going to load, which is, basically to sum up, I believe it's much broader and much deeper than people give it credit for, okay? So if we go back there, if I can go back. So I basically just said in the previous slide, it's complex, right? As I said, it's comorbid with many things, which means it's often tied up with or manifests at the same time as things like depression. You can get very depressed from the situation you're in. I was very depressed because of my anxiety, because I remember being 30 years old, doing my master's degree at Bath University in Chinese, and I would go there and just completely melt down, and then I would go back to bed in the afternoon. I'd come back home. I was living with my parents. I'd go back to bed sometimes because I was so exhausted, because I'd had a complete panic attack and an anxiety meltdown, and I had such like almost a migraine from it. My whole body was just exhausted, and I would just be depressed because I'm like, how long am I going to go on like this? I'm 30 and I can't even handle going onto campus around people. So it can be tied up with depression, as I said, OCD, intrusive thinking, intrusive thoughts, like you're an idiot, you get these sometimes like very perverse thoughts. They might be sexual taboos or nasty images. All these kind of things go on. This is what also makes you think you're going crazy. It can be tied up with sexuality issues, masculinity issues. A lot of guys I speak to, they feel very anxious around hypermasculine men, or men that they think are more macho than them. And this can be tied into gender roles in the family, what kind of father you had if you're a man. So there's often all these other issues that are tied in with it. It's a complex problem. And then it can be further complicated by substance abuse, whether you're relying on alcohol, relying on beta blockers or antidepressants, SSRIs. So it's very, it's a complex issue, and I want it to be given the recognition that it deserves. And it's also serious, as I said, right? So this is just recapping my main points. Do not diminish yourself. Don't let people tell you, oh, you're just a bit shy, you'll get over it, it's something you'll grow out of. This is BS, right? This is stuff that I grew up with, and I think it's not given proper recognition because most people have an element of social anxiety when they're younger, they're shy, and then it becomes something that you grow out of. So when you're like I was, and you're a reasonably big 6 foot 30-year-old man, and I'm telling a therapist, I can't send a text message because I just overthink it, and then when I do, it keeps me up at night because I worry like why the person hasn't replied, or I misinterpret what they say. And even they don't get it. They're just like, oh right, yeah, and you feel sometimes this total lack of understanding from people who haven't had the problem. And I felt very dismissed sometimes and misunderstood by certain therapists because they just haven't been through it. So to them, it almost sounds a bit ridiculous, but it's super serious. Don't let people diminish your struggles at all. Okay, thirdly, as I said, it's a symptom. I see it way more as a symptom of something much deeper. And the main, it's a symptom of this problem in yourself. You do not love yourself. You don't have any self-esteem. You probably didn't grow up with a sense of safety. You probably didn't have, if you're a man watching this, you probably didn't have a father who said, look, son, you're a good lad. I love you no matter what. Go out there, give it your best. I've always got your back. You probably did not have that, because that's like the opposite of what I had and the opposite of what most of my clients had. Most of us had a father who was probably subtly, subconsciously competing with us, criticizing us, and trying to sabotage us so that we internalize that, try and sabotage ourselves, doubt ourselves. And that's, there's a reason for that. We've been psychologically and emotionally abused usually, and it's not always done consciously, but that's where a lot of this problem comes from. And it can lead to this kind of what I call an internal hollowness, where you don't have this core of self-assurance and that self-efficacy, where you believe, yes, I can go into a situation and I can handle it. We don't have that. It's also driven by these cognitive distortions, where you just are warping reality. Like, I get on so many calls with good-looking young men in their 30s, and they don't have a girlfriend, they don't have a social life, they're not making the money that they should do. And it's because their mind is warped. Like, their way of thinking is warped. They do not see themselves how the rest of the world sees them. And the rest of the world is just waiting for them to step into their own power, to realize their own power, and to just say, yes, I want that, I need that, I would like that, I'm going to take it. But because they live in this warped reality where they're just like this pathetic, horrible, loathsome little simp, they're just missing out. And this is also where I was, missing out on everything in life. And then when you first get the first speck of confidence to just go up to a woman and say, like, I like you, I want your number, and then they don't just like reject you, it starts to blow your mind. You're like, oh fuck, actually these doors that I thought were locked all along, if I push on them, some of them are actually opening and I can actually have what I want. But you're just locked in this like completely false, wrong self-concept, which stops you from ever breaking out and getting the things that you can have in life. And this is extremely sad to see in so many guys. And the process of the work is to bridge that gap between this completely warped version of reality of how you see yourself and see the world, and start to bring it into a more rational, objective, balanced way. So you're like, oh wow, I don't have to match these like super high perfectionist standards I have for myself to be able to do well in life. People do accept me, people do find me attractive, I'm okay. And also, I tell the world who I am. I don't wait for them to say, oh, you're not good looking enough, you're not tall enough, you're not clever enough. I actually believe in myself, and then I tell other people, you treat me in this way because that's what I'm worthy of. I deserve this level of respect. And then the world and reality and the universe aligns itself and falls into line and order behind that, not the other way around. So that's the process of some of the work. So it goes very, very deep. That's what I'm saying. It's not like I've got social anxiety and that's the end of it. No, I fully believe and have experienced that social anxiety is the symptom of the deeper problems, okay? And as I say here, it goes to the very core of who you are as a being and how you show up in the world. So what we're looking to do through the work of recovery is to become a Weeble. Like, I don't know if you ever saw this, but in the 80s when we were growing up, you would have these Weebles and you could push them and they had a lead weight or whatever, a weight in the bottom, and they would spring right back up. And that's like emotional resilience. Because of the way often we were brought up and the messages that we've absorbed when we have social anxiety, one little push and that will just take you off course for like 2 weeks, or it will destroy you and shatter you. People used to actually even play on this. Like when I was at the embassy, there was one colleague who was like, oh, you should have heard what so-and-so said about you. And I was like, what did they say? What did they say? And he was like, I knew that would get a reaction from you because I was so insecure. I had no core. And over time, you can build this core up through work you do on yourself. And what I call this process the retroactive filling. You're like, previously you're like a hollow tree stump or, a hollow pipe. And what we do is you can fill this back up. You retroactively fill with this cement of self-worth, self-esteem, and by befriending yourself. And I did work in India in an ashram, and they call this process finding the friend within. You develop this friend within yourself so that then you can go anywhere, and you have this sense of like almost like being two people. You ask yourself, do you think you did the right thing in that situation? Yeah, I'm happy with that. Okay, cool. Then we're cool. As long as I'm cool with myself, then that's it. I live in a world where that's the opinion that matters the most to me. And of course, you don't want to become a complete sociopath and just ride roughshod over other people's feelings, but you learn to value your own opinion. And, of course, no one can like you more than yourself, because you can do the things the exact things that you really want to do. So like, it makes sense that you should be your best friend because you have the exact same tastes and interests as yourself. So over time, you can fill this chasm up and learn to love yourself and befriend yourself and enjoy spending time with yourself and all of these things. So this is like the process of filling in that lack and that space that was left, usually through some kind of disruption to the development, that should go on earlier in life. So, as I said, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. Usually it's part of a wider lifestyle, dysfunctional lifestyle. Oftentimes, poor lifestyle choices, maybe too much coffee, alcohol, poor sleep, whatever. Okay, and also one point that I want to make is this is a collective issue. You should not just, although it's a problem you want to sort out in yourself, it does exist in society. Now, one thing I wanted to say here is, as I said, it exists as a wider part of your life. So one thing that I've seen oftentimes and that was prevalent in my own life is you start off with low self-esteem and social anxiety, and this leads you to underachieve, whether that's academically, in relationships, but often financially and professionally. So this lack of money then leads you to feel like a low status individual. You know that you're not really achieving your true potential, or you're in a job which, is an appropriate fit for your skill set or your intelligence. And then this leads to more reduced self-esteem and your anxiety goes up. I've spoken with many people who are struggling with increased anxiety. Although they had social anxiety in the first place, it's actually getting spiked by being trapped in a very bad professional situation, often where they're being exploited, taken advantage of, or downtrodden by a structure or a boss, which basically makes them feel subservient. And this will, as a man, this will lower your testosterone. There's a book called The Winner Effect where you can read about this. But basically in those situations, because you're being treated like a servile person, you actually, it lowers your mood and can lower your testosterone. So you basically just feel worse being in those situations. And then the problem is that this can then make you feel helpless, you become depressed, and then you start to lack the motivation to actually change. And this becomes like a rut that you get stuck in, and then this leads to more low self-esteem, and you stay in this job where people just take advantage of you, use you as a doormat. You feel more and more downtrodden. You're not increasing your income. So it's just a cycle of this. And this is something that I saw in myself when I worked at the embassy in Beijing. And also I've seen it with many other people, which is why I wanted to flag it up here, because it is related to money oftentimes and your financial, your professional success. Also, one point I think is very worth remembering. Although this doesn't necessarily help you immediately, we have social anxiety and we really want to change our lives. But it's worth knowing that the whole society is anxious and people just hide it better than others, to an extent. I'm not saying there aren't confident, relaxed people. You do see that. But as a society, we are becoming more and more anxious and socially retarded. Like, it used to almost wind me up when I was back in the UK. In my apartment building, I would come down the corridor and people would almost like cling to the corridor wall and do their best not to look at me. And I would become almost like socially aggressive. I would say like, good morning, hello, like, yes, we are humans. It's normal for us to acknowledge each other. So I really see this like as part of a social movement as well. If we're to thrive as a collective society and a collective species and our collective consciousness, we need to do something about this. And I think it can start on the basic level of just like good morning, just greeting each other, having more eye contact, not just pulling your phone out in the lift, taking your earbuds out in the elevator so that you show other people you are actually receptive to some kind of exchange and conversation. Because it worries me a lot the direction that we're going in as a collective world society and a species. And you can see here that it's a rising epidemic. There are lots of articles and books coming out now about the effect of social anxiety on Gen Z. This new book by Jonathan Haidt is very good, The Anxious Generation. The impact, I'm not going to smash social media completely. Obviously, you're watching this on YouTube. I use social media to an extent, but I try not to be used by it. But I'm not a massive fan, and it is rewiring people's brains from the look of it. And the forecast is not amazing. These are some of I'm not saying these are the most authoritative stats. This is something I came across which just basically shows a predicted increase in social anxiety, which makes sense to me. And I think you've got to remember from a evolutionary perspective, we are wired to be social. And I get on so many calls with people who seem surprised that they're anxious, and they live in an apartment, they spend all their time by themselves. And they're like, but this is kind of part of normal society now, right? I just spend all my time on my phone, on my laptop, and I'm by myself all the time, or I'm in the office. It's like, yeah, we're not evolved to sit in fluorescent tube-lit boxes and then go back to a little box and spend our time by ourselves or with our girlfriend or boyfriend or our partner or whoever it is. Like, we're evolved to be pro-social, to have networks of like up to 150 people. There's something called Dunbar's number, which is the number of faces which we're actually evolved to be able to recognize easily. So it's like we're meant to be able to store 150 close connections. And it makes total sense to me. There's this evolutionary mismatch of what we're evolved to deal with and how to live, how we're evolved to live, and the situation we find ourselves now, which is just a blip and which is changing ever faster because of the rise of social media. So it makes total sense. We're just in a situation that we're not evolved for, and it's causing a lot of problems for us socially, with this social anxiety. So I think it needs to be looked at as well from this evolutionary psychology perspective. So as I said before, it's personal, not social. Just people act as this kind of mirror for us. They trigger us, but the problem is internal, and it's to do with our relationship with ourselves, and often this kind of dis-ease of how we are in ourselves. And then when we see other people, it triggers this consideration, this worry of how we stack up against other people. And it's just related to the kind of conflict or war. We're not at peace in ourselves. When you're at peace in yourself, you can go into a situation and say, hey, yeah, as I say, like transactional analysis, I'm okay, you're okay. You're not a threat to me because I've, figured myself out, and I know where I'm good and I know where I'm bad, and I understand my flaws. And I'm not saying I'm an embodied reincarnate Buddha and I walk around completely at peace in all situations. But generally, I've come to an accommodation with myself where I know I'm not the best looking guy on the planet. I'm not the smartest guy on the planet. But I do love myself for what I can do. And I know where my strengths are and I know where my weaknesses are. And I generally feel good in myself and happy with myself and grateful for my life. So it is very possible to get to this point. I'm not saying you have to walk around with like Johnny Depp levels of confidence or Keanu Reeves levels of charisma or whatever it is. But you can get to a point where you just generally feel okay with yourself. Life is good. Hey, buddy. Yeah, no worries. I don't need to go into a massive panic because I see someone who looks more attractive or more successful than me. So as I say, I believe it's totally internal and other people are just your trigger point, basically. And as I said before, it's kind of alarm system, don't just smash it. I mean, I'm not here to bash medication. I've spoken and read reports from so many people who've said, it changed my life, it really helped me, blah, 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 blah. But, for me, it just numbed me out and caused a lot of problems. I took sertraline, I took beta blockers, and there was always this feeling of like, this is not getting to the problem. The problem for me was wired into me from how I was brought up and what I was told. So I just had to relearn that stuff, and I had to go out and relearn interactions with people and practice stuff. And it was like I had to undo my childhood and educate myself, re-socialize myself over a series of years. And that's what I did. So I do understand it's different for everyone, but the people that I work with, they've had a similar trajectory to me. So if you are, a super severe case and you really do need medication, I'm not discounting medication at all. And I understand fully that medication can actually facilitate the talking process and so on. Some people even need medication just to be able to go into the therapeutic process or do some introspection. So I'm not trying to say medication is a bad thing. Just for me, like I say, it felt like just trying to smash the alarm. Or if you're just trying to manage or avoid your social anxiety in any way, that is just avoiding the alarm system. The amygdala is firing, right? And although it's firing irrationally, in some ways it is telling you, if you're that scared of other people, then look at it. Why are you so scared of other people? What is it that you don't want them to see in you? Is it your physical appearance? Do you hate yourself that much? If so, then you really need to look at that and work on that. Is it this feeling that they can see some deep perceived flaw in you? If so, then look into that, because you should not feel so unease with yourself. You know what I mean? That requires deep work. So go into that, like the amygdala is telling you something is up. So don't just think, oh, anxiety is bad, I shouldn't have this, I better take tons of beta blockers or drink myself numb. There's a message there. So we need to look at that. So this raises the question, okay, great, well done, Ed, you've waffled on for half an hour now. So what the hell do I actually do about it? Well, you can go through various different steps, right? I would recommend, first of all, looking at what are some of the potential other complicating factors. So for me, learning about OCD, learning about intrusive thought patterns, learning about masculinity issues, gender roles, this was all very important, because these were things that were all also complicating my issues, especially the intrusive thoughts and stuff. And then when I understood that, the different threads of this tangled yarn started to come apart more, and different pieces of the puzzle. And I was like, okay, so there's a bit of OCD going on, a bit of this going on, a bit of that, mostly social anxiety. And you just realize, instead of this morass of like, oh, I'm a crazy dysfunctional mess, you're like, oh, there's these different things that are happening, and there's different reasons for that, probably, like I say, through childhood and so on, and bullying and all these different experiences. And it starts to come apart into more manageable chunks. So I would recommend, first of all, do a self-audit of your own particular case. See what is complicating it. Are there, issues of body dysmorphia tied up into it, and self-sabotage? What else is going on there? I would also recommend trying to gradually wean off substances, and I'm not saying do anything drastic or without the supervision of a healthcare professional. If you're drinking a lot, like I was, smoking a lot of cannabis, as I was, taking a lot of drugs, as I was, then I would recommend trying to get off those, because it basically just numbs the problem. It doesn't help, the root cause. I would also really recommend diving into some stuff on the root causes, like toxic shame, cognitive distortions, low self-esteem. There's stuff on this channel. I will post more stuff because this really deserves addressing in more detail. I would also recommend looking at your wider lifestyle. What's your sleep pattern? Try and sleep early, get up early, try and exercise, try and eat right. All of this stuff sounds very elementary. It's common knowledge, but it's not common practice. It's quite hard to do, to really get all your lifestyle factors dialed in. I understand that. But when you do, especially on the sleep side, you do see massive benefits from that. I would also recommend trying to get off social media, more, reduce your time there, and try and connect more. Even if it's not connecting with other people, then at least connecting with nature and the wider universe. Just get your feet in the grass, get your feet on bare earth, go out into the trees, into the forest, whatever it is. I have seen persuasive research that is showing more time on social media, more time on screens, fires up the amygdala, can make us more anxious and this kind of stuff. So I just recommend reducing social media if you can. Try and connect more, even if it means just like nodding at people and just having some kind of social connection with people, a 2-second conversation with the person in the greengrocers, whatever it is, because we are evolved to be social creatures, and I feel that's what we're really lacking, and that's what's causing everyone a lot of pain individually and collectively. Also, I would recommend doing the inner work, which is working on your self-love and self-compassion. Try to view yourself more objectively. What are you saying to yourself all the time? You know, would you talk to another person? The things that I used to say to myself, it was like 24/7 just berating and criticism. If I did that to someone else, I would be taken off to the police cells, you know, and banged up for like harassment and hate crimes, you know, like, but I was doing that to myself. So try and look at what you're saying to yourself, how you're treating yourself. Try and focus on your positive aspects. Don't just discount the negative in yourself all the time, because that's a very common cognitive distortion. We often have like super high perfectionist standards for myself. I did for my own looks and my behavior and all of that. And I was like, unless I'm achieving to that standard, I'm totally unacceptable. And then I came to learn, actually, you can just be generally pretty good enough. And then, you know, that gets your foot in the door, and then you tell other people how you should be treated and so on. And also, you know, finally, you could look at what is the alarm trying to tell you? You know, as I say, if you get around people and you get very anxious about your appearance, then that is telling you that you have a faulty self-concept around your appearance. You have body dysmorphia, and that needs looking at. I would recommend researching body dysmorphia, which I had to an extent. I was like obsessed about even the angle of my ears and stuff. And you realize that you're just focusing in way too much with this kind of neurotic, hyper-focused, paranoid thinking that we have with social anxiety. We blow stuff out of proportion. Like, I do not go into, you know, the curve in my nose or the angle of my ears and stuff now. Like I used to, I could stand in front of a mirror and just like analyze myself, my hairline and all these problems that I had. I just don't go into that shit now because I just know it doesn't matter in the wider scheme of things. So look at what your alarm systems are telling you. Is it around body dysmorphia? Is it around people thinking you're weak and pathetic internally? Look at that. Where does that come from? So I'm really advocating here, just doing a bit of introspection, auditing your problems, try and do some research, get to the root of them more, and fundamentally really find ways to build your self-esteem and self-compassion, and and to parent yourself and befriend yourself. And I put stuff on this channel about that. And I realized, you know, there needs to be more on this, so I will make more videos on those topics because they are very key. So that's basically everything I got for you today. Next steps, please like and please subscribe to this video so that you'll get more content like this. So hopefully I can help you with your issues through these videos. Like this video because that helps the algorithm to get this out to more people so we can help more people. And if you'd like to reach out, I'm always happy to hear from people. I will respond to your emails personally. If you're having issues, feel free to reach out to me at ed@thesocialanxietycoach.com and speak to me there. And that's everything for today, and I'll speak to you in future videos. Take care and goodbye.